Welcome, sentient beings from all known universes and beyond. It's time to activate your cranial downlinks and prepare to receive a raft of discussion on a cosmic ocean of science fiction and fantasy topics, interviews with local area genre devotees, and insightful prognostication by our soothsayers of science fiction, our forecasters of fantasy, and any other beings that happen to get caught in our gravity well. This is the Galactic Driftwood Podcast.
And welcome to this episode of the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. I'm Bill.
I'm Seth.
I'm Jenna.
I'm Chris.
And we have a friend of the show again, Stu Burns, joining us. Stu is a vampire folklorist, probably vampire hunter, if truth be known. And we're going to have an interesting discussion, I think, this time. Stu is going to be talking to us about a Italian horror film director, Mario Bava, B-A-V-A. And Stu's been doing some research on him for a paper that he's working on. So, Stu, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of jump in here and let us know about this guy and some of the films that he's done.
Oh, okay. Well, Mario Bava is, he might be the great lost filmmaker. I mean, he's a huge cult favorite. People who are into Bava really love Bava, and then people who are, if you've ever seen the movies by Dario Argento, or people who are influenced by Dario Argento, that's that kind of thing. He really is kind of the caboose to Mario Bava. He really, kind of takes up where Bava ends up leaving off. Where that's a good thing or a bad thing is open to some debate. But Bava, he's one of these guys who started off as a cinematographer, as a lot of directors do, making these incredible images for other filmmakers, doing at least a competent job. And in 1957, there was this I Vampiri movie that was filming in Italy, and their director quit. And the producer said, Mario, step in, get this thing done, finish it up. So for 5 days, he worked on this movie and did the editing, and he pieced together this halfway competent vampire movie. And people said, well, he was a pro. He brought everything in on time. It's all good. And they had him, and he ended up being basically the relief pitcher on a couple other movies like that, because they bring in a guy to finish up the movie. Well, he's done it before. He can do it again. And in 1960, he got to do this. He finally got control of his own production. He made this movie called Black Sunday, which has just these, and as a cinematographer, he brought in these incredible images. He based it on a Russian novel by Nikolai Gogol called The V. Has a very complex, very metaphysical plot involving a lot of reincarnation and recognition and history and all sorts of things. And he really went in some interesting directions with it. What was interesting about the time that he was working, that's Barbara Steele there as playing a double role. Actually, she plays both a 200-year-old witch who was killed during the Inquisition, and a young woman who's living today. And of course, there's the idea that one is the reincarnation of the other. Yeah, again, you have these striking images of she throws back the robe and here's her exposed rib cage, like, oh my goodness, and all that sort of thing. So that becomes more his his signature with the images. But at least Black Sunday itself is kind of a thought-provoking piece as well. But the trouble he runs into, and to some degree this has a little bit to do with when he was making movies. In 1960, the studio system in Hollywood had basically collapsed. And in the 30s and 40s, you had the same organizations that were supplying the money and then owned the production, the studio was making the movies, and then owned the theaters, owned the distribution, sometimes owned the newspapers that would advertise the movies. RKO would be straight all the way down. Somebody like MGM or Paramount, they'd own their own theaters in cities all over the country, and that's how they distribute movies. And by 1960, that had largely broken down. And so you had these people saying, well, if we want to make movies, we can put our money anywhere we want to. Let's throw some money at Europe, because they can maybe do it a little cheaper. That European market is a little more built in. Bring them over here and show them in second tier theaters. Do what we want to do and make a good return on that. So Bava's making these movies, but he's making them with the idea that they're going to go beyond Italy. They're going to get recut. This is the same environment that like Sergio Leone's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly comes out of. The spaghetti westerns all come out the same financial paradigm. But what ends up happening as he exports these movies, like the next movie he makes, the next big production he does is a movie called The Girl Who Knew Too Much, and it's a takeoff on the Alfred Hitchcock movie. And the original cut is intriguing. It's it's got a lot of the Hitchcock suspense in it. It stars John Saxon, who some of you folks will know from A Nightmare on Elm Street. Some of you will know him from Enter the Dragon. And it was a nice suspense movie. It wasn't as well done as a Hitchcock, but it was a nice suspense movie. And again, had some tremendous imagery, some tremendous shading, use of shadow, kind of like Jenna's video right now. Actually, you black out the back and make it look all mysterious and whatnot. Well, and Chris's too. Actually, just tell the truth.
Yeah.
Hey, it's called mood lighting, sir.
That's right. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, and Bava was really a master at that early on. Yes, yeah, The Girl Who Knew Too Much. The problem was the studio saw it and said, this isn't commercial enough. And so they recut it, shot a few more scenes with the lead actors and with the lead actor, with John Saxon, brought him back in, and made it into almost halfway a comedy. So instead of being someone who's intelligent and canny and trying to work things out, she becomes more of a character who's kind of bumbling her way through this mystery. And it made it almost a completely different movie. Kind of destroyed the suspense in places too. There will be times when she's being pursued and suddenly it just cuts to another scene. You'd be tempted to say that they flat out ruined the movie, really, through the recutting. But they did reasonably good business with it. And Bava realized that if I'm going to keep making movies in this situation, I'm going to have to make them with the idea that they're going to be recut, that this is going to happen, my stuff's going to get butchered. And so instead of focusing on plot, he started focusing even more on making these images, on this photography. He latched onto the Hammer motif of a lot more lush color, using the frame very creatively to make use of his small budget, because if you only show this much, you're not showing all the ugliness around you. You're not showing the half-finished sets, or the smaller sets. You can make the world look a lot bigger than it is in these movies. And
Stu, real quick, is part of that too, because he wasn't not only the director, he loved doing special effects and was known for special effects. Like you brought up Dario Argento, and he had actually worked on the special effects for Inferno, which is one of his movies that's in the trilogy that was started with Suspiria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so that passion for creating the effects kind of supplemented when he knew they were going to disrupt his story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he said because if I put these images up here, I know they can't do anything with that. They're going to have to include that because it just looks so good. And you start focusing on that, and you have the idea that he was still trying it at certain points to really be able to overcome this paradigm he got himself into. In 1972, he made this movie called Lisa. The title's reason is amazing. Lisa and the Devil, starring Elke Summer and Telly Savalas, of all people. Yeah. The idea of Telly Savalas playing the devil with the lollipop and everything is just pretty surreal. And wouldn't you know that? And that thing showed at the Cannes Film Festival, at the Paris Opera House, or at the Paris Theater, excuse me, for a few days, and got some good notices. But the distributor said, you know what, we can't do anything with this. It's too abstract. It's too arty. And so again, they took it, they recut it, they added some scenes, and made it into basically a sequel to The Exorcist.
Wow.
Yeah, which the movie had nothing to do with.
Yeah.
Added some nudity and all that stuff. Just really tried to sell the movie. So what we have with Bava is a guy who made Black Sunday, which is legitimately great, creepy film. And he kind of loses control over it. He keeps making movies. He's making a living, which is better than most of us do in a business like this. But he doesn't really fulfill the potential he probably had making such a good film early on. He does some flat out bad work. He made the sequel to Dr. Goldfoot and the Bikini Machine. Dr. Goldfoot and the Girl Bombs.
This sounds amazing.
Oh yes, the first one starred Vincent Price and Frankie Avalon.
Not two people you would think of in the same
Oh,
same
God.
sentence normally.
Yeah,
what Hollywood bet was lost to make that?
That's the thing.
I
Somebody
can
wanted to
tell
throw,
Chris is looking at pictures. He's like, I have to know.
somebody wanted to throw the money at it, and so they brought him on. He said, "Yeah, what the heck, I'll do it. By now, what the heck, I'll do it." Because anything I try to do that's really good, you're going to recut anyway. It's sort of a mentality of maybe you accept a defeat, maybe perhaps a little bit too easily, perhaps not, perhaps none of us have been in his shoes. He ends up making this movie based on an Italian comic book called Diabolique, which some of you, well, it says a lot about the movie that most of you, if you're familiar with the final film, Diabolique, you're probably familiar with it from its Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode.
Yes, I've seen this.
Yes, that says a lot. That says probably all you need to know about the movie. It ends up looking just kind of silly. And so my question to the group and to our esteemed audience is, where else have you seen this, where you see an edited version, either because it's foreign distribution or because the movie gets away from the producer or from the director or whatever, where you've made a real distinct change in what this was supposed to be and what it ended up being. I can think of some examples. One early example is not a genre movie, but you can certainly see where it's going. Ingmar Bergman is one of my favorite, great Swedish directors. One of the greatest directors in the history of film. One of his earliest movies was called A Summer with Monica, and it's a wonderful, sensitive film about two young people who have a baby and the stresses that place on their life and what happens after that. The American distributors got a hold of that, and they recut that and made it and promoted it as basically softcore pornography. And it was showing it the little, that must be 18 to get in type of.
Yeah, the NC-17 when they were promoting that rating.
That would explain the Google search results.
And this is back in the 1950s when anything from Sweden is like, ooh, free love and all that, so they got a whole, it maximizes what nudity actually Bergman did include in the movie in the 1950s. So a guy like Bergman, who easily could have said the same thing, said, you know what, no matter what I do, they're gonna, when he gets overseas, they're gonna absolutely butcher this thing. So what do I do? And he doesn't surrender. He ends up making, some of the best movies ever made. And he gets control over it. So
no matter what I do, they're going to put more boobs in it. So I might as well just go ahead and do that to start.
Do the boobs in my style, so at least it'll work. So I can think of actually a modern U.S. film that they tore apart and took away from it, and that's Knights of Badassdom, which is a very, in itself, it's a fun comedy horror from 2013 directed by Joe Lynch, and it's about an RPG, or actually straight up a LARPing event.
LARPing, yep.
That goes terribly wrong when a succubus is accidentally summoned.
Oh my God.
And there was a lot of great hype. There was this movie had a lot of love around it. Peter Dinklage was in it, some characters from Community. And what you got at the end, because they ended up removing some of the key producer, the director at the end, you can tell that they had edited it down to something they thought would be more commercially appealing.
Yep.
And it lost. You could tell there was a lot lost. It was fun, but it wasn't everything it could be. And then and you could tell by the actors change. When leading up to the film, the actors were super excited, and then afterward, it's they got struck in the face what they saw.
Yeah, its true potential was robbed. I actually own that movie and I've watched it a few times, and what you got wasn't really, as Jenna was pointing out, what we were expecting kind of going into it. And that can happen in movies, but this one seemed like the soul was kind of taken out of it. It was sliced and diced for the big screen. This will sell more, and realistically, the fan base that wanted this was like, well, no, we don't care what those people want. We want what we actually expected to see out of
Right.
this. And I think the actors, all of them that were involved, were really into wanting to see what we would have hoped would have came out of that. And I think that kind of also destroyed it for them too. So
Yeah, there was a campaign for the director's cut. I mean,
Yep.
it
Hasn't succeeded yet.
not that I've seen. There was
No.
anticipation for it, but it was just really disappointing. It was one of those things where you saw the studio, like the dudes in suits who have no creativity themselves, just caring about dollar signs versus letting something be the magical thing it needs to be.
and they don't get it. Like they'll look through a screening and they just don't get it. And I don't think that they should be the ones making ultimately the creative decisions at the end of the day.
Nope.
And it should be like, look, if we put this out there and you don't make the money, then I just don't work with you anymore.
Yeah.
And that should be that. It shouldn't be, well, I don't get it, so I don't think it'll make money. And so I want to slice and dice it to make it this, and I think that's acceptable. And then it comes out to be garbage.
And we've
Yeah.
already had a whole
I-
podcast about this, but the same was with The Empty Man.
Oh,
Yes.
That, they produced something, there's a lot of potential, and then the studio
Oh.
was bought by another studio, and they're like, oh, we don't like it, we don't get it. And
that
they
was a
just
case though
hamstring.
where that didn't happen though. They tried it and it just didn't work, and they released it in its
Yeah, what
full
ultimately
version.
got released was the original
Yeah,
was
I
the
mean,
version that
it's
they wanted,
true,
but
the
it was an
ori-
attempt. You're right. There was an
Yeah.
attempt to do that.
So even though it was released as the original, they still hamstringed the promotion. They didn't give it its full worth because
Yep.
they didn't see the value.
Yeah.
But I think-
Another. Go ahead.
I was gonna say sorry, who was supposed to go ahead?
I don't know.
So
Well, the one that immediately comes to mind for me, whether you liked it or you didn't, is Justice League.
I was going to bring that one up.
And Jenna, we're not getting into whether we liked it or
Can
not.
we
but
not?
this is just an
You can dip your
example.
toes. Let's not go down the rabbit hole.
I'm
thought
not
it was
going down the
great.
rabbit hole. Don't worry. I'm just bringing it up as part of this conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, that was another one where an original vision was chopped up to be something a little bit different. And the thing is you have these major plot lines that can be kind of deviated that completely ruins a film, and it could be something as little as a 30-second scene that really helps ties it together for other people or drives home a key point that when you cut that out for the sake of cutting it out, or it's just too smart for you, then you ruin it. Kind of makes the film fall apart. So to me, it's like cutting out chapters of a book,
Yeah.
out of a
Yeah.
novel.
And I
You
mean, an
just-
editor can tell you that this isn't working here. You need to consider to cut this or to reframe it, but that's less what we're talking more about. Studio executives coming in
Right.
and going, we can make this more marketable. Toss in 2 more sex scenes, lose this boring talking shit.
Yep.
But
One,
I think what
oh.
Stu is doing by bringing us this
Mhm.
this specific person, because like you look at the images, if you even just search him, and you're like, I've seen that. And especially if you're a horror movie fan, you're like, oh yeah, I totally see the roots of this one director that I like Dario Argento, or I mean the ones that like this, like that produce these very, like the lighting and everything that comes together to set the mood of that film. Their roots being in this director, like I guess he's credited too for being the father of slasher films, because he did Twitch of the Death, aka Twitch of the Death, Nerve, aka Bay of Blood,
They have blood. Yeah, that's the
1971. And I don't know if you want to touch on that too. And I think so if you love the horror genre and all these images and color, I think color, like you brought up, Stu, is really important. These aspects that tinge the Halloween season, he really is someone who set the stage for that.
Yeah. He definitely takes that to the next level. He has, but it again, it's part of like the whole like I can throw this idea out there, but he's either doesn't get fully realized because and perhaps it's just because after a while he just wasn't that good at narrative anymore, because he lets that atrophy, or he's decided I know that it's not going to be presented in that way, and so I'm really going to be putting it out there, just for the imagery, just the pictures. And it becomes almost more of a, as you said, like a source for filmmakers as opposed to a great filmmaker per se in his own right. Yeah, like you said, he largely invents the slasher movie where it's like, okay, this, you like this? In 1964 is a great movie called Blood and Black Lace, which is sort of a proto slasher movie.
Mhm.
But then towards the end of the 60s, like, okay, you like that? Well, well, here we go. And I'm going to really start slashing the heck out of people and showing, increasingly gruesome murders and showing, the color red in that way to show red blood, which is something that Dario Argento absolutely latches onto and makes a lifetime out of it practically. Throwing more nudity out there, throwing more lurid content. A lot with what the Hammer folks are doing, but he's doing it with a little more shock. Make it's a little rougher, a little more jagged, it's got a little more emotion to it than some of the Hammer stuff. But again, it comes back to this idea that he knows it's going to get recut at some point.
Yeah, that's sorry.
Well, and to go back to a classic, because I realize I'm my email is Stu the History Guy, so I live in the past, obviously. But the most
Don't reveal your email on here.
Well, there you go. Well, you don't know the domain, so there you are.
Yeah.
But the classic example I can think of something that of a studio cut that really absolutely makes a genre practically. And you probably, I see Chris nodding. You know what I'm going to say, probably, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Gojira.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yeah,
because that was one that was it came out in 1954 in Japan, right? And then it was brought to the United States in 1956 and re-edited, where a lot of the plot themes were either changed or completely eliminated. Because it was a highly anti-nuclear film when it came out in Japan, right? But they didn't want to keep that when they brought it to American audiences, because America was investing heavily into nuclear weapons at the time, and so they didn't want to keep that same theme in the movie. So
and they also just commercially didn't think it would play. I mean, Gojira is almost a poetic film. There are scenes where when Godzilla's attacking Tokyo, and the people who were almost blasé about it, saying like, I lived through the bombings in 45. It can't be as bad as that. Right. And this woman's is raised. Godzilla's coming down on her and her children. She says, "We'll be with your father soon." This real idea of the historical moment in that movie. And when it comes to America, they recut it almost entirely. Yeah. Much like Bava, they just keep the images. They say, okay, we've got the giant monsters squashing a city. Okay, we'll keep all that stuff, but then we'll throw in Perry Mason.
Right.
We'll throw in Raymond Burr as the main character narrating this thing. And it almost entirely, it's an entirely different film.
Yeah. Right.
What about we watched The Prince of Space at your place, Bill? Yeah. That's another one that they kind of did that too, where it was a series beforehand, and then they just like shoved it all into 2 movies.
Right. Edited it all together so that it made sense or tried to make sense of it as a single movie.
Made sense.
Right.
Loosely.
I drank myself to sleep on that one. So yeah.
Another movie they did that with, and whether this is genre or not is up to you, is Mulholland Drive, the David Lynch film. That was going to be a television series. And he lost funding for the TV series. Said, "Well, I'll take what I've got and I'll make a movie out of it." And it's a heck of a movie. It did work.
So I do wonder with we've seen success in fan and community pushback to get releases of things. We saw it. Seth brought it up earlier with like the Justice League and getting that director's cut. And I am curious going forward whether or not voices will be loud enough to continue to get. If people are voicing like, hey, just so you guys know, this is garbage when it hits the big screen, but I do have a cut that was actually better in their opinion, whether we'll continue to see that. I would love to see that come to fruition, but at the same time, I'd also hate it because then we're in the future we'd be talking about 2 versions of a film always. Why do we always have to the director's cut? Can't we just get what the movie was supposed to be?
Terminator 2 is a great point. I think of that.
Yeah, that's
Because
another one. Yeah.
if you've seen, like, there was so many great little scenes that connected the narrative and world built even more. Like the whole, unless you've been lucky enough, because I think there's been a couple of different director's cuts. The one where not Sean Bean, because that's the guy who dies in every movie, but who is the guy who played Reese in the original film?
Oh.
That actor. Because he was also in Aliens and Tombstone. God, anyway, you would know him. The guy who played Reese in the original movie actually makes an appearance in Terminator 2 to tell Sarah, no fate but what we make. And you don't get that in, I think, both the original release and the first director's cut. Like, I think it was the second, or by that time, the third release of James Cameron's vision, that you finally get those full little details that made it richer. Michael Biehn, yes.
Michael Biehn, gosh. Yeah, you said Sean Bean. I could not get it out of my head.
No, I know. That's right. I was like, I know there's a Bean. There's a Bean.
Well, and not to interrupt, sorry, Janet, but a couple of episodes ago, we reviewed that movie, The Empty Man, and if you recall from that, in that was a 2.5 hour horror film that we watched, and it was originally edited down from a 3-hour movie to 2.5, but then it was screened before studio execs who hated it, and they decided that it wasn't going to work, and they had it edited down into an 1.5-hour movie, screened it before audiences, and it played so miserably they decided, okay, screw it, we'll just let it go as a 2.5-hour movie and let it get out there. But they really didn't put any support behind it, and as a result, it was largely unknown, and it's starting to be rediscovered now. It came out in 2020, and people are starting to discover it, and it's kind of turned into a bit of a cult following. I don't know if you've heard of it, Stu, or seen it.
You shared with me earlier. We did. I haven't seen it yet. No.
Okay, yeah, it's really a good film. I think every one of us here that saw it liked
really
it, right?
enjoyed it.
Yeah,
it's one of those hidden gems out there. It really is
HBO
great.
Max, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Even though there might be two versions, which I know is irritating to you, Chris, what I'm hoping with all these streaming services is that the directors who have this unfortunate hamstringing of their films can do is pipe up really loud. Well, if you want the real deal, I have it, and then someone will come pick it up.
I will say this: while I'm annoyed by it, I'm more annoyed by not having the availability of it.
Yeah, no, that's true. They lock it in a vault.
Yeah,
like the supposed
I would
director's
rather have
cut of
it.
Dune.
Yeah, with all the streaming services that we have, and since we've moved to Blu-ray, there's no reason to have all that content upon release. What I don't want is the only version available in the first 2-3 years of that movie being released is the one that was released to theaters or whatever, and then a few years later, if you wait, you get the other version. Just release it all at once. I, for one, will happily pay a little more to have more of that content in there.
Stu, I'm guessing that the uncut versions of Mario Bava's movies are available.
They're beginning to be. Yeah, I mean, part of it is that a lot of stuff was done preemptively. The movie I was talking about, Lisa and the Devil, which was recut to House of Exorcism, and ended up playing in drive-ins across the United States and made $5 million in 1975 dollars. That was actually pretty good. Yes, that is available. A lot of them they're increasingly available. You can take a look at them. I get the feeling though that, again, at least past his first 4 or 5 movies, he almost kind of gave up. You can say I'm going to be a martyr, or I'm going to suffer for this thing, or I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to make a living and I'm going to go do stuff, which a lot of people do. Good, because the converse, I love this little story because I think it's actually might be true, is that when Miramax was going to distribute Princess Mononoke, the great Studio Ghibli film, the original, of course, now I can't remember who directed Princess Mononoke. Miyazaki, excuse me. Yeah, when The legend is that Miyazaki did this. Miyazaki says, I didn't do this, but my producer did. They sent a katana, full size, to Harvey Weinstein with a note saying, no cuts.
Wow.
Uh,
Not so subtle threat, maybe.
Yes, sometimes you can get around it.
Well, it's like, one, it's just a really nice present, but two, it's also a bit of a threat.
Yeah.
Right.
There's certainly the implication there. Yes.
I did not know that little story, and I hope that it's absolutely true. And I'm glad it came out the way it did or whatever. It's one of my early animated films that I really grew to love. So
Yeah, I think that's one of the first ones that I would have seen too.
Yep.
Yeah, if I ever get a katana in the mail from Jenna, I'll take it for the threat that it will be.
I don't
I
think
like
that.
to deliver things personally.
Yeah,
Bill.
right.
Yeah,
And honestly, can you see what an American studio would have tried to have done with a movie like Princess Mononoke? This incredible, deep, dreamlike,
Yes.
very culturally specific landscape. It's very difficult to comprehend in a lot of places. If they recut that thing, you easily could destroy
Oh yeah.
all of that.
yeah. I
And-
could see an American company just like cutting out everything and everything they could to make it a G-rated film.
I mean,
Yeah, and that wouldn't be the only film from Studio Ghibli that they would probably end up doing that too. So I collect a lot of. I just recently bought a new Blu-ray box set with all the Studio Ghibli films, and when you go through them, it's if they were to rob anything out of there, it would just completely ruin it. And I think the following that they have and the fan base has grown because it's been left untouched, pretty much. It hasn't been butchered. Like we have a lot of other films. I mean, so on the animated size and on the anime size side of things, just so you guys are aware what butchering can look like. I'm a big Dragon Ball Z fan, right? There
gonna
are
bring that up.
several versions of Dragon Ball Z out there that are recut and edited constantly and re-released, from shorter versions to longer versions, and it's annoying. I'm one of the biggest fans out there, and I own pretty much every edition. And there are literally some editions that completely cut out most of the storyline, and you lose appreciation for the characters or certain things. It doesn't flow, and that translates to a lot of movies, which is, I mean, obviously what we're talking about today. So I'm just thankful that Studio Ghibli didn't have to go through that, but not every studio is that lucky. There's a lot of things, out there
especially
that
the
can
early
cut them.
ones.
Yeah, a lot of the early ones. So
Like my
Um,
gateway anime was Sailor Moon, and that series was absolutely butchered to the point
Yep,
that they were
yep,
editing
Sailor
the
Moon's
animation.
another one that a lot of people grew
Huh.
up with, and they just don't understand how much was cut out of it. How
So
dark
much
some of
murder
these
and
things
death.
can be.
Animated.
Yeah.
Because like the original version of DBZ that came over and showed on Cartoon Network,
Yeah.
they had to take out everything that might be offensive to conservative America, so they got rid of all the blood they could.
Yeah.
Master Roshi is famously not drinking beer, but now I'm drinking orange juice.
Not looking
No,
at
it's
Playboy
beer.
magazines or anything like that. Like Master Roshi's a bit of a pervert, and they cut a lot of that out. So
Oh, they had to cut a lot of stuff
yeah.
out of the original Dragon Ball too, probably.
and what's resulted in over the years is they keep releasing these unedited versions, if you will, or whatever. I continue to collect them. I go through them. I've watched about every edition there is out there, but you see how much it gets taken away from what the original writers were doing. So
So I think we're all a little bit tired of the same play-by-play commercial shit that's coming out of Hollywood. And I think if they would just take the chance and just start letting people do their full visions instead of trying to, like, let's just do something quality that is the vision that the creator has, and make a fan following, maybe a surprise hit for people who you wouldn't have thought liked it, but they love it because of it, versus watering it down to be as appealing to as many people as possible. And then they're just like, meh.
I think it comes down to, like, look, Hollywood, we're all adults. Don't filter what it is that I kind of want to see, or what the director's vision is. I don't need my content edited so that I can warm up to it or anything like that. Like it is what it is. I'm gonna love it or I'm gonna hate it. And that's it.
I will give you a little bit of pushback as an author here, Jenna, in that every author, every creative person needs someone, either an editor or a friend who's got taste that they can trust, to just slap their face every now and again and
I
go,
think that's fair.
no,
Yeah.
you're getting out of control. You can't make a 5-hour conversational piece movie.
That's fine if it's a friend or someone who can help
Like
support the
great.
vision as
We're
it is,
talking
not
about
some
like the
suit.
executives.
Yeah,
or
I
some
know the
suit. Yeah.
suits, get the suits out of it, but every creative person needs someone who can rein them back in before they get too full of their own bullshit.
And,
Yeah,
and a lot of that owes to medium. What we forget is just how expensive filmmaking has become in the 2020s. I mean, my God, it's just, I mean, if you compare it to something like writing prose or even or doing comics or anything like that, like nowadays, an $8 million movie is a very low budget film. And that's
which is mind blowing. That is $8 million.
Yeah, and
what are you doing with that money?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Craft services.
And if you think about, how high definition movies and TV have really changed what you see on screen. I mean, I was reading something the other day. They were talking about the original Star Trek: The Next Generation and how they had, signs in the corridors that would identify different rooms, and it would have the room description on it, and then underneath they would just write some nonsense stuff like something from the Wizard of Oz, for example, knowing that screens and TVs of that time, the resolution was so poor you would never be able to make that out. But now, that stands out on screen, and people will take that type of stuff and blow it up and make a big deal out of it, right? So you have to have super attention to detail on everything you do in these new shows. And I think that brings in a level of complexity that just wasn't there before, for one thing, that helps, increase costs of films.
But you can also do stuff on a low budget that looks way better than anything we got 20 years ago. Like some YouTube channels are doing amazing things on no budget. Just people who wanted to make something cool.
Yeah, some of those shorts on
free time thing.
Some of those shorts on Dust are amazing. Those sci-fi shorts. With what they do with those. So
obviously, I love movies that are going to keep them coming, but appreciating the roots that they came out of and kind of like that history is important too, which is what Stu brought us today. If people are preparing their Halloween watch list, what are the top 1 or 2 Mario Bava films that our audience has to see?
If you want to include some Bava, if you haven't seen Black Sunday, you gotta see Black Sunday.
Okay.
That movie is amazing. What gets me is the titles of some of these movies are just ludicrous, especially when you compare them with the content. There's a mid-60s movie he did called Kill Baby Kill.
And I've seen that one actually.
Yeah,
that was a good ghost story.
Yeah, and it's very. I mean, honestly, some of this stuff is very derivative. As a lot of filmmakers are. As it's opening up, I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is another Hammer movie, because it opens just like every Dracula movie ever made, and then just goes on from there. It's kind of like, as Seth can tell you, one of the great writing exercises is you start with the beginning of somebody else's story and you just go on from there. And it looks almost like that's what it did, but it's a very arcane film. Always still a lot of good imagery, better cuts. It's more delicate movie. That was one he probably kept a little more control over. So Black Sunday, Kill Baby Kill, and a fourth one that's very appropriate for Halloween. If you just want to go for it, just watch A Bay of Blood. Just say to heck with it. Go hard or go home.
And it sounds like from the content of that movie, some people did go hard. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the Friday the 13th series flat out steals some of the murder scenes from that movie. It's supposed to know.
It's from Italy. No one will ever notice that it came from that movie.
Right.
Exactly.
All right. And any other because obviously in your research of him for this paper and the upcoming conference that you're going to. So if you guys want to see Stu in a conference, you should definitely tell us that information at the end of the podcast. But is there anyone else you discovered in your research of him that we should be aware of and that you want to throw out for people to check out as well? Less known?
That I discovered? I'm not sure of anyone that I discovered off the top of my head. If you're going to want to and by the way, by the time this airs, the conference will have been and gone, unfortunately.
Oh.
But if you want to have another experience of a movie that's just had all kinds of issues with editing and successive cuts, one of the great horror films of all time, a movie that's one of its nicknames is the Citizen Kane of horror movies, is a movie called The Wicker Man. And not the Nicolas Cage version, for the love of God.
No,
I was going to say, I've seen The Wicker Man with Nicolas Cage,
right,
and I drank myself to sleep.
Yeah, you would have to. But it's oh gosh, it's Christopher Lee is the
Okay.
One of my all-time favorite, Christopher Lee, like one of the best Draculas of all time.
Yeah.
Yep. Jenna, have you seen Wicker Man?
No, I haven't. It was always on my list that I need to see, but I
You'd love it.
I know it's been highlighted as like, if you love horror, you have to watch it.
Mm-hmm. If you love horror, if you've ever been to Mystic Fest,
yes,
you'll love it. And it's interesting because it was made in 1973 when the whole idea of when paganism was still resolutely considered mostly a bad thing.
Mm.
But and by the end of this film, you might still come to that conclusion, the way that the film tells the story. But just watching, because it's about a police inspector who goes to an island of pagans, off the Brit, it's part of Britain, but it's an island where they've basically gone to pagan ways. They've abandoned Christian religion, gone to pagan ways, and to investigate a missing child. And regardless of how the movie ends up, their way of life is, I have to say, is just undoubtedly very appealing in a lot of ways. You start wondering, this would be a darn good way to live, be much more open about sexuality, about nature, about people's relationship to each other. It's a heck of a little movie. It's a heck of a little movie, and towards the end, especially, it's absolutely terrifying.
Yay!
But the way of life, definitely well worth a little bit of child sacrifice. One or two, come on.
Human sacrifice, it's fine. I mean, probably a bad kid anyway. Didn't put their clothes away, didn't do the dishes, talk back.
Yeah, the old
to
gods
parents.
don't need good kids. Come on.
And Seth, if I was going to rebut that, there'd be a spoiler warning, so I'm just going to have to. If you haven't seen the movie, if there's one that's absolutely worth it, absolutely go for it. But here's the crux is it exists in a number of different cuts.
Oh.
And try to get the most complete one possible, but in the most complete ones possible, you'll see some places where it's just obviously they got a reel from just a terrible print.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see some oddities in the middle of the movie, but you try and get the most complete cut possible. That is just one heck of a movie. So if I was going to recommend two, even above the other Bavas, Black Sunday is a fantastic movie, and to take a good look at what edits can do to a movie, The Wicker Man is just fantastic.
All right.
But then if you just want mindless fun, just go Bay of Blood. Oh yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stu.
Yep. Thank you, Stu. Appreciate it. And we'll be looking forward to another appearance of yours next time around. So
Or come back whenever you want.
Yeah.
We like.
Yeah, let us know when you're available, or if you're working on something you think might be interesting to our listeners, let us know. We'll have you on to talk about it.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. So, well, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. You can find more of our episodes on galacticdriftwood.space. And of course, you can check out our partner podcasts on synergynation.net. Quite a few different types of shows out there. You might find one that appeals to something you're interested in. So take care, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. For more information and past episodes, please visit our website at galacticdriftwood.space or subscribe to us on YouTube. And now, please deactivate your cranial downlinks, collect your towels, and be sure to watch your step as you exit our gravity well.